Okay, just a minute. The back of her head was showing as though her neck was snapped. There was some sort of confusion back here. So it was definitely her husband. That's what I'm picking up. She's still, strangely enough, she must have come forward and showed her mom this. Because I think that's how her mom was able to tell the constabulary what happened to her daughter.
Good. Now, how do you know her mom did that?
Welcome to Seeing Dead People, the mystery storytelling podcast with a clairvoyant twist.
Radio Sydney presents Seeing Dead People, Episode 14, The Greenbrier Ghost Speaks. Hello, Darcy. How you doing today?
I'm great. How are you, Nicola?
I'm good. I think this is going to be a fun one tonight. Darcy, we're going back to a ghostly tale, and I always think they're a lot of fun.
They are a lot of fun.
So we are today heading south and east, Darcy, to the great mountainous state of West Virginia. The year is 1896, only 3 decades after the end of the American Civil War. The bulk of our ghostly tale is simple. A love story gone bad, sadly all too common, but there's a supernatural twist that rivals the shocking spinning head of Linda Blair in The Exorcist. In fact, it is considered the only incident in the history of the American judicial system where a supernatural presence has assisted in solving a first-degree crime.
Wow.
Yeah, cool, eh? Our cast is limited, mainly just 3 people, a mother, a daughter, and a son-in-law. So let's just set the scene with photograph number 1. It's a dreamlike old sepia pic of a white house settled into a treed landscape. Have a look, Darcy, and may I welcome you to Greenbrier County, 1,000 square and undulating miles nestled into the dark, deep woods of the Allegheny Mountains, West Virginia, in an area known for its coal, timber, and agriculture industries. I know it's early, but any inklings yet, Darcy?
Well, I just opened the picture, and I'm looking at it. I zoomed it open so I could see the house, and it gives you that, you remember that show, Deliverance?
Yes.
It gives me that kind of feel.
It does, doesn't it? It's sort of that spooky backwoods, scary kind of attitude thing.
Yeah, like, a girl who gets stuck in the house screaming because she doesn't open the door.
Yeah, that's about the look of it for me. So now we're going to zero in on the house itself. Have a look at our second photograph for a close-up of the old family homestead. As you can see, Darcy, the 2-story wooden frame structure is far from fancy. In fact, it looks downright ragged and slumping, surrounded by a dingy white picket fence. I believe this image is circa our time frame in the late 1890s. So this house became the abode of our 2 main characters, a young, newly married couple with the uncommon last name of Shue, spelled S-H-U-E. Now, again, I haven't given you much to go on, Darcy, but I'm just wondering if there's anything quivering now in your little psychic heart.
Well, first of all, the sadness attached to this house, even, I think, before they moved into it.
Really?
Yeah, it just feels like it was sad to begin with, and it just progressively got sadder. There's a feel of, obviously, death in this house, for me, but it also feels, I'm not 100% sure it was violent or it was accidental. Passion of love.
Okay.
Passion murder.
Okay. That's interesting. Yep, that we'll tie that in later.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, do you know, okay, the other thing I'm picking up is that there's a connection also to a child, but I'm not sure if the child was actually born or not.
I understand you said there's a connection to the child. I didn't get the last sentence.
I'm just not sure if the child was born or not.
Oh, okay. Interesting. I like that. Anything else before we move on?
I'm going to take it as the lady who's dead, though.
Pretty decent supposition, yeah.
Okay.
Okie doke.
That's about it so far.
Okay, good. We'll see. I think you'll see that those are a couple of already quite insightful comments. Well, then let's nail down our bride. Although I can't honestly call her a blushing bride, you will of course wonder why. More about that later. She was born Elva Zona Heister around 1873 in Greenbrier County. Her family called her Zona, but other than having 4 brothers and God-fearing parents, not much else is known of her childhood. So have a look at photo number 3, if you would, Darcy. This is a shot of Zona sometime before she was married. Not a very great photograph, as you can tell. But can you glean anything from this photograph?
Well, I actually look at photograph number 3.
Okay.
I think it's a statement more than a query.
Okay.
And maybe it was just the clue of the blushing bride. But didn't she have a child before marriage?
Darcy, I don't know how you got that, because I'm going to be telling you about that later, but you just tell me why you got that.
Because I see 2 children in the trees of the first picture of the house. And they're in the trees playing. One looks like it was born, and the other one looks like it wasn't born.
Okay, so we're talking about in photo number 1, which is the landscape, pretty hard to see photograph. There are trees everywhere. Where do you find these little infants peering about?
So you see the front of the house with the 3 pillars, and then there's the tree in the foreground.
Yep.
And that's where I see them.
Okay, and how do they look to you? You're defining one as being a child that was born and one that was a child that possibly wasn't born. What do you see?
There's an image at the bottom of the tree, a white image of a little girl. And then there's an image of a boy who I'm thinking is the one who wasn't born, scampering up the tree.
And how do you know he wasn't born, or what gives you that idea?
Just this feeling of transparency.
Oh.
I don't know any other way of saying it.
When you say feeling of transparency, do you mean you're seeing him as being transparent, or you're getting some sense when you look at him that you had a feeling of transparency? I know you've said that, but I'm trying to just nail it down.
I think it's when I look at him, it's like I can see through him.
Okay. Oh, cool. Okay. That's very interesting. Anything else you want to tell us about the little kids?
Well, actually, there might be 3 children.
Is there a third one in the same tree?
To the side of the little girl.
And is that child alive or dead?
Okay, that one I can't tell.
Okay.
My guess would probably be dead too.
Oh, okay.
So now I'm going to go look at her. And is Eva, Anna, I can't remember what you said she was called at first.
Her first name was Elva.
Okay, is there an Anna or Elizabeth?
No.
Okay.
She's Elva Zona with a Z. Heister, that's her last name. But she was known as Zona.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, she looks like I'm looking at her picture now. She looks to me like someone who's used to being ignored, not recognized, taken advantage of.
Oh, you think that, do you?
Yeah. And I think she could be tough at times if she needed to, but through her eyes, I'm looking for salvation, I'm looking for recognition, I'm looking for, I hate using the word love, but maybe that is what she's looking for. She's looking for someone who can love her, who she is.
Okay. Well, that's really different. Okay. Well, I can tell you a little bit about her, and I think you're pretty well going on the right path there. When she was about 23, Zona was transfixed by the sight of a gorgeous, muscular newcomer, Erasmus Edward Stribling Shoe. Believe it or not, what a name. But he was nicknamed something even odder, Trout, as in the fish. Of all things, he was a blacksmith. Hence, he had large muscles, and he was roughly 10 years her senior. Unfortunately, Zona's mother, Mary Jane Heaster, instantly disliked and distrusted Trout. But what did that matter? Let's just say the sparks flew literally off the anvil, and despite Mary Jane's vehement protestations, Zona and Trout were married in November 1896. So let's zero in on our newlyweds. First up is another shot of Zona on her wedding day. Have a look at photograph number 4, Darcy. For me, she looks older than 23, but her attractive face with very high cheekbones and hooded eyes, I think, is very arresting. What do you think about her?
Oh, yeah. Here she looks like a totally different person.
Doesn't she?
Like, strong, fierce. Even her eyes look different. Determined is the word I would use on her.
Yep.
But now when you look at her, you can see the beauty, as you put it, the cheekbones and everything. In the previous picture, number 3, I would have not equated this woman to looking like she does now.
Yeah, I think that's an indication, I hope, that of the poor quality of the photograph number 3.
Okay. Let's hope. Because the photograph number 3 made me feel lost, deserted, desolate. This one is like, I know what I want, I'm going after it. And she reminds me a lot of her father.
We haven't even talked about her father. I know nothing about him, really.
She has the same jaw, almost of him.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and because he's standing over her shoulder as she's getting ready for this picture. So her dad was with her the day she married. He probably would have gone for someone who was hardworking and everything. And I haven't seen a picture of him, but I do feel like at times, maybe it's just because he looked like a brute, that he was a brute.
Her own father.
In some aspects, as well as her husband to be.
Okay. Well, we will move on then. That's good. To her husband. But before we do, I just want to give 2 additional notes regarding Zona. As I suggested earlier, she wasn't a blushing bride, and somehow, Darcy, you picked this up immediately out of the ether. Zona had given birth to another man's child while unwed the previous year. Now, what happened to the child and the father is unknown. But you somehow knew that she'd had a child while she was unmarried. I think that's really astounding. And the child was born. Again, you got that right. I think that is blowing me away.
Well, the picture number 3 shows her. It's almost like disassociation, as though whatever transpired, it's like she got lost in there, the desolate feeling I had.
Yep.
And then that's probably what it is she probably had postpartum.
Yeah, and as I say, we don't know what happened to the child, but she didn't keep it.
No, the father has it.
Oh, okay. See, I know nothing. Again, the records show us nothing about what happened to the child or who the father was or what he did.
Okay, the father has the child. That's what I was told.
Oh, okay. And who's telling you that?
She is.
Zona.
Yes.
So you are having a conversation with Zona already?
Yep. She's already doing her little chatting.
Oh, cool.
So,
okay.
he's trying to push my cat off the chair.
Okay. Okay. The second thing I wanted to tell you about Zona before we move on to the groom. Have a good look in image number 4 of her lovely wedding dress. It is a high-necked dress. And that high-necked dress will come back to haunt us very shortly.
Okay. Well, when I'm looking at this, I'm thinking not only is it a black dress, it makes me feel like I'm protecting myself in some aspects, like I'm holding my voice in because I'm not allowed to speak it out now.
Oh, really?
But, yeah. I feel too that this is hiding something. If I look at it from the metaphysical point of view, she's hiding something.
Zona is.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know that at the moment, but we'll continue on to the husband if you're game.
Okay.
His name, as I say, is Trout, as he's in photograph number 5. And I think you'll agree with me that he's very handsome and clean-cut with charismatic eyes. I can see how many a Greenbrier country gal would have wanted to spend time in his blacksmith shop. What about you?
Oh, absolutely. It's like he's gorgeous.
Isn't he? He's quite the hunk. They were obviously a stunningly good-looking couple.
Yeah, exactly. What I was going to say is they must have made people's heads turn. Because they've got the same kind of energy. Now, it could just be the photograph that's doing it, but they have that same look, the determined look. I feel a little lost when I'm looking through his eyes, but I feel like I found what I was looking for. It's weird because I'm going to say I think he was hoodwinked.
Really?
Yeah.
You mean he hoodwinked into marrying her?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Hoodwinked as to information maybe withheld.
Like the fact that she'd had a baby before she was married?
It could have been, yes.
Yes, it could have been. That would be something that I would think cause a bit of strife in an early marriage.
Yes, it would.
Especially in 1896.
Yep.
Okie doke. Well, for a few weeks anyway, Zona and Trout are happily living in that white clapboard house until something dreadful happens. Before I tell you about it, why don't you tell me about it? Darcy, what happened?
Well, I'm going to say that it's like the man was possessed and he either strangled her to death or there's a complication. I feel like she was killed.
You feel like she was killed?
And it's weird because when I'm looking at this, I almost get the feeling that he's possessed. You know, have you ever seen someone go off the deep end? And once they have, they can't seem to stop?
Yeah, they break completely in their nuts.
Yeah. And that's what I'm feeling here. It's like there's some hidden rage inside of him. And just out of curiosity, she's not wearing something around her neck when she dies, does she?
I don't believe so.
Because she wasn't, I don't think she was strangled.
But you said earlier you thought she was strangled.
I did. But now I'm wondering if it's something they did together. You ever heard of where people strangle each other during sex?
Yeah, autoeroticism sort of idea. That
Thank you.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember what it was called. I'm wondering if these two were like that.
I don't know.
I mean, I know he killed her. And she's saying it. She points her finger at him. He did it. That's her simple words. He did it.
But is she giving you a hint that it was something to do with passionate sex and not something to do with a rage of anger?
Both. It's both.
Oh, okay.
They're intertwined. That's why I can't determine which way I want to go with it.
Oh, all right. Well, maybe as we go along, you'll get a better idea.
Okay.
So we're now in January, the new year, 1897. So they've only been married a few weeks. She was hammering away in his smithy when he sends a local kid to his house on an errand. The poor kid saw a nightmare that would never leave his thoughts. Have a look at photo number 6, Darcy, which is a black and white shot of the interior of the Shoe home, showing the view from the kitchen to the stairs. We can't see anything horrific, but I'm hoping you can, Darcy.
So isn't she dead in the hallway here?
You think?
There's an image of, it's a really fuzzy image of a person standing at towards the base of the stairs in the hallway, and I would have thought that was her.
Okay.
And she knows the boy who came to the house
Yep.
because I think he worked for them or something. But yeah, you can actually see the head. It looks like her head was covered in something. And there's right towards the base of the stairs, right in the hallway. So 1-2 panels over from that picture on the wall,
Gotcha.
and then down in that area.
Okay, so are you saying she's at the sort of the foot of the stairs in the hallway?
Not quite the foot of the stairs, I think, but it does look like she... Yeah, okay, let's go with the foot of the stairs.
And is she dead?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And do you see anything else in the manner of her death or in how her body looks while being dead?
Well, right now I see her sort of like if I'm sitting on the floor with my back propped up.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And that's sort of the image I'm getting of her.
Okay. Anything else?
And you're actually with her head still attached.
Okay.
Something about her neck.
Something about her neck. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then, shall I tell you a little bit?
The back of the neck, not the front.
Oh, all right. And can you actually see that, or is she telling you that? What's happening?
No, it's a feeling I have. Some sort of... You know, I guess she'll tell us that she was laying on the floor a little bit, right?
I'll tell you.
Okay.
Okie doke. Well, I'll tell you what the boy discovered when he came into the house. Zona was lying on her back. Her eyes were wide open, and she was near the foot of those stairs, in that sort of hallway foot area. There was a lot of blood and absolutely no movement. So the panicked boy hot-footed it home, and then he and his mom tore across the frozen fields to tell Trout, and then pushed onward through the bitter cold to summon the local sawbones. Now, the discovery of Zona's dead body was, of course, shocking and unexpected, but it took Dr. Knapp, the local quack, and I don't use that term lightly, as you will find out, it took him about an hour to reach the Shoe residence. By that time, something else odd had happened. Trout Shoe had come home, washed and redressed his beloved's body, and lugged it upstairs to the bedroom. Now, as you probably know, Darcy, the task of body preparation was usually handled by the women of the town. So before I go any further, Darcy, what's happening here?
Well, either he is in a psychotic state or he's removing whatever evidence was attached. And didn't he put her into her wedding dress?
Yeah.
Okay. So maybe he's trying to remember her the way she was, but my guess is that he's removing whatever evidence is there.
Yeah, that would be my presumption and the presumption of everybody afterwards. But it wasn't Dr. Knapp's presumption. So I have to give him a little bit of a break. He had a heck of a time examining one specific part of Zona's body. I'll let you try and guess, or divine.
Okay. I was just going to say, didn't he say she died of like hemorrhaging from a child?
Wow. Well, you've nailed it. Yes, he did say that, but he didn't say that in the first instance, Darcy. What he said, interestingly enough, in the first instance is that she died of what they call everlasting faint, which in those days was a euphemism for heart attack. But later, he did actually change his cause of death to hemorrhaging as a result of a miscarriage.
But that's not how she died.
Okay, yes, that's our story. Exactly, that's not how she died. So I'm going to bring you back to him examining the dead body. He's trying to determine, of course, cause of death. What part of the body is he not able to sort of deal with or have his hands on?
I want to say her head.
Yep, exactly. What's happening here is, remember I mentioned that she had the high-necked wedding dress? Well,
Yeah.
it seems that this high-necked wedding dress became her burial dress as well. Legend has it that Dr. Knapp couldn't get his hands on her to examine her neck for three reasons. One, the high stiff collar was in the way. Two, her face and neck were swaddled in what Trout called her favorite scarf. And lucky three, because Trout himself was in the way, cradling his dear wife's head in his hands, absolutely inconsolable.
Hmm.
And so that's...
Why?
Go ahead.
And why, oh why, was he cradling his dead wife's head in his hands unless he was hiding something?
Very good. Now, at the time, Dr. Knapp determined that Zona died of, as I said, everlasting faint, which I think is just a delightful phrase for a heart attack. But of course, it didn't address the blood issue. Eventually, he comes back and says it was a miscarriage. So he calls it childbirth, but it is a miscarriage because the child was, well, we're not quite sure the length of the term of the child, but obviously not anywhere near full term.
No.
But he had been, we find out that he had been seeing Zona recently for a health issue, which likely was a difficult pregnancy. And therefore, it's logical to presume she miscarried and had an excessive amount of blood, and therefore the hemorrhaging and the blood trail that freaked the little boy out.
Yeah.
So now, during the wake, Trout appeared out of his mind in grief, and all the time he was gently holding his wife's head as the townsfolk filed by paying their respects. Zona was buried in a Methodist church grave, which inexplicably remained unmarked until 1979. I don't know why, but they finally gave her a marker. And that was that. Aha, but it wasn't. Zona's mum, Mary Jane, was convinced Trout had murdered her only daughter. She had no proof, but she was now learning Trout was truly a dark horse. He had teetered on the altar twice before, his first marriage ending in divorce after years of his abuse, and the second barely a year after the nuptials, when wife number 2 died in mysterious circumstances. So what do you think Mary Jane did?
Well, she probably did a seance to see if she could talk to her daughter. That's what I would do.
Okay, well let's.
If I thought my daughter had been killed by someone, I'd be calling on the other side saying, "Hey, give me some information."
Okay, that's a very sound point, Darcy. But imagine you're someone unlike yourself who doesn't get involved in seances. How else would you call for your daughter?
In a dream. I would call in a dream.
Okay, well, Mary Jane did kind of that and kind of something else. She began to pray, begging her daughter to come back and tell her the truth of how she died. And her prayers were answered in a dream. Now, Mary Jane vehemently said she was awake when these dreams happened, but, obviously you can't be awake when a dream happens, so who knows? But this, I'll let you try to divine what might have occurred after she began to pray desperately to her daughter in a dream.
Well, I think her daughter came forward and would have told her how she did die. She would have told her how her husband had either bashed in her head. There's something about her, the back of the head, because it wasn't the front I was seeing, it was the back. So, just a minute. I want to say he hit her. Did he push her? I feel like there's an argument.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And as they're arguing, something came out that he didn't know about.
Oh, so it could be something like the unborn, the previously born child.
Yes.
Okay. Do you think?
And I feel like his anger mounted. I feel like that, like the back of her head is really sticking out here.
Okay.
Really bad. and that it, okay, just a minute. The back of her head was showing as though her neck was snapped. There was some sort of confusion back here. So it was definitely her husband. That's what I'm picking up. She's still, strangely enough, she must have come forward and showed her mom this. Because I think that's how her mom was able to tell the constabulary what happened to her daughter.
Good. Now, how do you know her mom did that?
Because I would.
Okay, that's sensible. Okay, well, here we go. Mary Jane's wishes came true. She was visited in her dreams over several nights by the specter of her daughter. Zona's ghost claimed that Trout had always been abusive, and on this one occasion flew into a tremendous rage when the dinner was not to his liking. Now we have an artist's representation of the visitation. If you look at photograph number 4, you may not be able to glean much from an artist's representation, but this is an idea of what it might have been when Zona visited her mom and started telling her what happened.
Okay.
What do you see there?
Oops, I don't know if I have the right one up.
Number 7.
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, they made the mom look really young.
Yeah.
But it's like she's showing her the back of the head.
Yep.
And obviously mom's a little bit of a faint since she's clutching her chest and trying to figure out if she's seeing the right thing.
Yep.
Yeah, you're right. Not really picking much up, but it's definitely a idea of how the mom might have saw the girl.
Right.
That's it.
Okay. Well, here's the inside scoop, supposedly from the ghost. So angry was Trout that no meat was served, he had overpowered and strangled Zona, his massive blacksmith hands not only choking her to death, but smashing her windpipe and breaking her neck.
Oh.
To nail her point home, the Greenbrier ghost rotated her head all the way around and back again, just like Linda Blair in The Exorcist.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Scary.
So, this is what the mother was told. This is what the mother dreamed and what she believed. So if you just look at photograph number 8, it's just a tombstone of Zona Hester Shue. I just wondered if you got anything from that. It's a photograph of her actual tombstone, which was only put down in 1979.
Well, I know where it was put down because she actually puts the town on the map, so they had to have something to show people.
Well, I would have thought so, but I would have thought they'd have done it long before 1979, since this is really one of the more famous ghostly episodes in West Virginian history.
I know. I mean, I think she's happy with it. Interesting that they put pennies or something on the tombstone.
Yeah, little stones or something. I'm not quite sure what that's about, like to show you visited.
But, yeah, I'm not picking anything up.
Okay, no problem. I didn't think so, but there it is. She has a tombstone. Okay, well, believe it or not, Darcy, this determined Mary Jane Heaster managed to convince the local prosecutor of Trout's guilt and of her story that she got from her ghostly daughter. The prosecutor grilled Dr. Knapp, began to realize that perhaps not a great examination of the body had been undertaken, and he decided to exhume Zona. Photograph number 9, again, it's just an artist rendition, so you may not be able to pick up much, but it's of the actual autopsy. Now, supposedly, this gruesome task was carried out in Trout's presence. He was demanded to be there. Seems he stood by, whittling until the physician's examination reached Zona's neck. Then he became extremely agitated, which wasn't surprising, Darcy, because the results were startling. Zona's neck was indeed broken, her windpipe crushed, but there were also fingerprint indentations and bruising, all signs of strangulation, which, interestingly, the Greenbrier ghost failed to mention. What do you think?
Of the strangulation?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I saw those marks on her neck from the get-go.
Yep, you mentioned strangulation and breaking of the neck.
So I'm surprised that they weren't seen before that.
Well, it was hard to see them when you're wearing a high neck dress and you have someone's hands covering them.
That is true.
That's why Dr. Knapp was, that really was a local quack.
Yeah. So not at all surprised, because to me those marks were there. Even on her wedding day, the marks were there.
So what do you mean by that?
Well, I think she knew ahead of time that he was strong and abusive, but she thought she could change him. That's why she ran away to marry him. I mean, they didn't go down to the local church to get married.
Well, I'm not sure they were married locally, but I don't know that it was anything hidden or possibly rushed, although they certainly hadn't known each other for very long. But it wasn't well received, as I said, regarding her family.
Yeah. I wanted to call it an elopement because the family didn't agree to it.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. Absolutely, because the family did not agree to it.
So, but I feel like she knew that he was an angry person. That's how she worded it. Angry. Maybe not so much violent. She didn't know about the violence so much, but she knew about the anger.
Was she pregnant when they got married?
I'm thinking there's a possibility, yes.
Yeah, me too, because the timing is, they didn't know each other for very long. And as you said kind of earlier, they married quickly. And we think of it as almost an elopement because she married without her parents' permission or involvement. So it seems like it was a bit rushed. And then we have the difficulties regarding possibly a miscarriage. It all seems to tumble in too easily to not be just that.
Yes, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah. Okay, well, extremely embarrassed by his professional inadequacy, surprise, surprise, Dr. Knapp had to admit he'd blown it. Zoned hadn't died from falling down the stairs while suffering a miscarriage, but in fact was murdered most violently. Now, the murder of her, I'm wondering if she was strangled and thrown down the stairs, which caused her to have the actual final hemorrhage. I presume she was having some issues before that, but I'm not sure that she was thrown down the stairs and that added to her broken neck. I don't know.
I felt more like she was thrown against the stairs.
Oh, okay, and hence the back of the head problem.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's certainly possible. I think, as you said earlier, this guy flew into one of those unbelievably uncontrollable rages.
Yeah.
And it might have been predicated on discovering something about an earlier pregnancy. We'll never know.
Yeah. So does the mother and daughter look similar?
I think so. I'll give you a shot of the mother in a moment. Okay? I'll just tell you that as a result of the autopsy, Trout Shue was arrested and charged with the homicide of his bride. And of course, he heartily protested, claiming innocence. Now, this is where our tale spirals into the real, strange but true dimension. Of course, the whole county, including the eventual jurors, knew and had eagerly embellished Mary Jane's ghostly tale. So, before I tell you about the verdict and trial of Trout, have a look at our third main character, as you mentioned just a few minutes ago. Have a look at Zona's mother, Mary Jane Heaster, in photo number 10. Looks, I think, quite a lot like her daughter. What does MJ tell you?
Yes, she does look quite a bit like her daughter. And it's almost as though, like, when you look at the picture and you see all the bubbles and everything around it, like there's one on her, my left, her right shoulder, that makes me feel as though maybe she's got an angel that walks with her. So it is feasible this lady could have very easily passed as a medium.
You think Mary Jane could have?
Yeah.
And you're saying that not because there's a spot of something on the photograph because it's an old photograph?
No, it's because just the look of her. She could have easily been a medium and been hiding behind the guise of the church.
Oh,
Because then you wouldn't want to be known that you could see spirit or stuff, because she would have been locked up.
oh God, yeah, you wouldn't want anybody to be knowing that about you. Although it's interesting
Yeah.
that after her daughter died, she didn't mind telling the world. In fact, she pushed it onto the world that she was
Yeah.
able to see her daughter.
She would be the first person to ever have a spiritual communication be recognized in a court of law and actually ruled upon. That just is so unheard of, but that's the only way this could have worked.
Now, how did you figure that one out?
Because if she had a dream and then it went to court, and they actually pulled the body and went to court, yes, they're going to use the evidence they have there, but they also used the evidence of her dream, the fact that it was so detailed, and because it was almost like an act of God telling her.
Wow. Well, I'm just sitting here gobsmacked, Darcy, because that's exactly what happened. At Trout's trial, when the key witness, Mary Jane, enthralled everyone in the impressive stone Greenbrier County Courthouse with her riveting experiences, her testimony was considered fact and sacrosanct. And on July 11th, 1897, the jury delivered their verdict. Guilty. Trout Shue was sentenced to life in prison and eventually died 3 years later in the West Virginia State Penitentiary, falling ill during a prison-wide epidemic. But you are right. Mary Jane's testimony about an apparition in a dream, giving her evidence that that apparition, as her daughter was murdered, that was the first time ever, it's never been repeated, in U.S. judicial history that they've accepted that.
Well, as I was talking about it, I got goosebumps head to toe, so both ladies are together now.
Oh, you see them?
Yeah, the mother and daughter. So they are together.
Well,
But that's just amazing that could happen then. I try that now. It would never go through a court of law. You'd get laughed out.
oh, absolutely. But it's interesting, as you said, you normally one wouldn't want to go around making a big deal about the fact that you possibly have, spiritual medium-like capabilities. But on the other hand, Mary Jane was so adamant that this is what had happened and wanted so much to, find justice for her daughter. She was able to perhaps swallow that whole fear and move forward into the light and say, I saw this and it is true.
But I think what she did is she made it an act of God, and there's the difference.
Okay. All right.
She
So
made it an act of God showing her giving her this. It was God saying, my daughter needs to, what's the word? The law of justice needs to apply to my daughter because God showed me this vision.
I get you. So that's very, very clever, because the people of the time, obviously, we knew she was God-fearing, very seriously God-fearing, and the people of the time were God-fearing. So for her to believe herself that this vision was brought to her through God, and then that's how she told it to the population, then they would believe it as well as something coming from the greater God, rather than directly from some spiritual connection with her daughter.
Absolutely.
Wow. So yeah, I could see how the jury would accept that, and they sure did. They accepted it. So this is the end of our ghostly tale, Darcy, and it's nice to hear that the two women are together. But it's not the end, of course, of the Greenbrier ghost story, because it continues on and on. And I've got one last photo for you to have a look at. It's just a historical marker from West Virginia, and it memorializes Zona Heaster Shue's astounding story. So would you mind reading it to us and tell us if you gain anything from that?
Okay, so it says, interned in nearby cemetery is Zona Heaster Shue. Her death in 1897 was presumed natural until her spirit appeared to her mother to describe how she was killed by her husband, Edward. Autopsied on the exhumed body verified the apparition's account. Edward, found guilty of murder, was sentenced to the state prison, only known case in which testimony from ghosts helped convict the murderer. Well, I think that's just. I think that it's too bad more ghosts couldn't tell you exactly how it happened.
Well, that's...
Now I want to go visit the town.
Yeah. Well, why is it that they can't?
Well, I don't know if it's because we've lost sight, so to speak, or whether it's just that there's so much happening now. Like, her murder would have been one of few, maybe in a year.
Right.
Now there's so many, trying to keep up to them is difficult.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can see that it would have been a really big deal. I mean, it still would be a little bit of a big deal, someone being murdered or dying tragically, but it's not nearly as big a thing as it would have been in 1896 and 1897 time frame.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that was a fascinating tale. Thanks, Darcy. And I think it's really impressive that Zona and her mother, Aunt Mary Jane, made U.S. Judicial history. That's remarkable.
I think it's amazing, and it's nice to see that there are powers beyond our understanding sometimes that weigh on a positive side of the law.
Yes, nicely put. And I'd like to sort of reconnect with what you've said at the beginning, because you managed to very quickly zone in on what had happened. You know, you were able to pick up the fact that there was some kind of uncontrollable rage. Now, that may not be that surprising because we're talking husband and wife, and most of the time that's the husband is the one who's the troublemaker, and the wife is usually the victim. But you were able to add to that she had been strangled and her neck had been broken kind of idea. But to me, the most telling insight you had was that you thought that she had a baby before she was married, and that she'd lost a baby. I don't know about the third baby. I'm not sure where that is. She may have had that or not. We don't know. In fact, maybe the baby that was miscarried might have been twins. I don't know. But you were able to nail that element, those facts, that there had been a baby before marriage and then a miscarriage in this instant. I think that is really quite astounding.
Well, the part of it is what you said at the beginning about not being a blushing bride.
Yep.
That could have been anything, but it was this sense of guilt around her that really made it stand out.
But you don't think she would have felt guilty because she had sex before she was married in those times? It made you lead you to believing it was a child?
Yeah, I don't know why it made me think it was a child, but I mean, it could have been the guilt of sex, but there was something else about it, and I still can't quite put my finger on it. But the thing is that, like, if I didn't know better, I would have said she was a surrogate for a couple who couldn't have a child.
Now, why would you say that? That's really, really odd.
I know. That's what I'm saying. If I didn't, like, that's what it feels like the way she gave up the child. It wasn't the same as you have to give up the child because you're not married. It was like a willingness to give this child up.
Maybe, it did happen a lot in those days, perhaps another family needed a child, wanted a child desperately, and she was able to give her child to them, the old adoption thing.
It could have been.
So she would, that's sort of somewhat like a surrogacy.
Yes.
Well, I guess we'll never know, but thanks. That was, I think that was a really, really neat ish episode, and really some cool things that you managed to pull out of the ether as usual, and I just don't know how you do it.
Me neither. I wish I could really say how, but I just, like I'm sitting here crocheting and I look at the pictures and crochet as we're talking and whatever comes into my head like a flash of light.
That's so cool, because I have to tell you, nothing comes into my head while I'm doing this. I'm just, concentrating on telling the story and listening to what you say. So I think it's so remarkable that you're able to, these sorts of things can flash into your head based on looking at some photographs and hearing me talk.
Well, I'm glad they do too, because I'd be out of business otherwise.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, that's been terrific. Thanks. As always, I really enjoyed it. I hope you did too.
I did as well. Thank you.
Okay, good.
We hope you've enjoyed listening to Seeing Dead People. Whatever's going on in Darcy's head, I think is so cool and astonishing. We'd love to hear from you with questions for Darcy about her psychic process or suggestions for other mystifying situations you would like us to investigate. So please, shoot us an email to info@radiosydney.ca with Seeing Dead People in the subject line. New episodes of Seeing Dead People will emerge on the first Saturday of every month and will also be available every Saturday night at 8 p.m. and Sunday morning at 10 a.m., both Pacific Standard Time. Seeing Dead People will also be available as a downloadable podcast online at radiosydney.ca for your convenience. Cool news! Seeing Dead People is now a podcast on YouTube. Just search for Nicola Furlong Mysteries, and you will find 3 podcasts of videos dedicated to Seeing Dead People. One for our actual complete episodes, another for Darcy's fascinating answers to our listeners' questions about her psychic process, and a third with teasers highlighting each episode. Thanks so much for listening to Seeing Dead People. I really dig researching, writing, and communicating with Darcy and her otherworldly contacts. So until the next time, remember, Seeing Dead People is a blast, with goosebumps guaranteed.
This has been a program of Radio Sydney.